along Bourbon Street. If their arm, maybe they even twirl around a little bit on the street, out in front of people. And I think one of the things that I think happens is that we end up with sort of three competing ideas. I'm so embarrassed. My parents are out dancing in the street. And then the third one is, I love this. I love seeing my parents, have a little swing in their hearts and in their, as we grow up. But this idea of having competing ideas in our heads, different values that we're wrestling with. I've been false identity over time in our ego and everything that it may come from what our parents think we're supposed to value or believe, and we kind of pick it up from them, even though it's a particular way to try to get them to like us, and we start trying on to acting a certain way, dressing a certain way that might not be us. I might not be dressed like this today if I weren't standing up before you, but I love what I do. It's not a false part of myself, but sometimes we end up going into a job and bringing a part of ourselves. Sometimes at church, and they act a certain way. Even couples they'll come into the church. They'll be fighting the whole way to church in the car, but then they'll get out and they'll walk through. And part of growing up and part of really coming into our own. The other thing I remember a lot about solving all the world's problems, and some of it was just naivete. It was just all the ideas, because we realized, wow, the world's a lot more complicated. Leadership's a lot more complicated than I realized. Sometimes we have ideas, and some of those ideals I don't want to give up on. They're not naive, and they're not better. And that we can do this differently than, I say may not, because maybe we could. Maybe someone said a small group of people might be the only thing that's ever changed the world. But maybe we can't change the whole world. But one thing we can, community. What kind of community do we want to have, and do we want to be a part of, and do we want to hand on to our children? Community, and we're the ones in charge. So we get to decide. And I think the pandemic in some ways kind of wiped the slate clean. Seeing some town hall meetings starting this month and throughout the year. Initially to talk about what we want to do with our campus, and eventually we're going to be doing a visioning process for what we imagine also this pandemic onto the other side. But the other thing I think the pandemic did was it helped us realize that life can change like that. Things happen. And so we need to really appreciate, and I think some of us do more now than ever, the fact that we have the breath of life in us. That the time we were a little child, I want to do something with my life. I want to make a difference in how I live. And I want to be part of creating something, movies. And we're like, I want to be a part of something, make the Jewish-Christian dialogue group here in the community with a group of ministers, rabbis, and others in the community. I've been doing this for years. They just this past meeting this month, that I'm sort of confused about that. Now, if somebody doesn't believe in God, then what does redemption mean? And so I told them a story that I heard from a colleague named Forrest Church, late colleague named Forrest Church, who he talked about. He used the example of a coupon. A coupon is something that we use. It really doesn't have any value other than, as a liner for a bird cage. But if you bring it to the store, it could be worth $1, $5, $10. You can redeem it for its full value or its intended purpose. If we sit quietly and don't do what's in our hearts to do, what I like a paper in the bottom of a bird cage. But if we use our gifts, our talents, our ideas, our love in ways that make the world a different idea, even if it were very different from the one that they had. So what I want to say about All Souls is that the Tulsa Historical Society Hall of Fame. So there were 6 people inducted in the Hall of Fame. 4 of them were members of this church. That's pretty great. Tanner, they're great corporate philanthropists and individual philanthropists. They help with the gathering place. They help a lot with the food bank and have just done a number of great things. This congregation, they've done a lot. So proud to see Dennis. Dennis actually mentioned All Souls. I really appreciate it. Dennis mentioned All Souls in his acceptance and said, this All Souls, I want to give a shout out to all as an out gay man All Souls was my church. And All Souls let me start an organization to help other gay and lesbian, which is now Oklahomans for Equality, right here in this church. Possibly the only church in town that would do that. And he was telling how the Tulsa World newspaper had a big article. After a number of months, and they finally got a place of their own, and the organization had solidified. They moved out, and apparently the church had been getting bomb threats and phone gave us a shout out. But I was thinking to myself, imagine that this week, Tulsa held up as one of its favored sons, Dennis R. Neal, not O'Neill, I heard that, Randy, and more communities here in Tulsa. This is the reddest of the red state. This is the most conservative, not only politically, but religiously, considered the buckle of the Bible Belt. And yet, this week, they invited others who had been inducted previously to stand. And they're naming all these names, and a quarter of those, my predecessor, John Wolfe, he's in the Hall of Fame. There's only, I think, 5 ministers in the whole city. Now, this is a city to the Hall of Fame having shaped the history of this city, and one of them is the senior minister of this church for 35 years, John Wolfe. I was so proud. And then one of the inductees was Eva Unterman, a ceremony here in Tulsa. And she was being inducted, and she reminded me when I went up to congratulate her that they started and they met for the first 10 years here at All Souls. All Souls was all over the place, that this church matters, that the people in this church try to live their lives in a way that makes a difference. And they are making a difference, and we are making a difference. Place stands for people living bold souls who are making a difference and living inspiring lives. All Souls, I want us to be forever a center for people of all backgrounds who are creating new ways of valuing each other and the earth. We are needed more than ever right now. I want us to be a catalyst for relationships with our neighbors across. We are needed more than ever to be a place that can bring folks together for real dialogue, real connection, and real understanding. Now, some people are going to say, aren't we already doing enough? Marlin, our Community Resource Bank has distributed 75 tons of food to our neighbors who, during the pandemic, were struggling with the store. We're going to have some refreshments in a little while. We've started more microcredit banks in Central America and South America than any other church that we know of. Over 30 microcredit banks that are each themselves over and over again. And we're going to keep doing all that. Our house committee, I see Hugh Burley's here and others, they have rehabbed over 200 homes for low income in all kinds of different ways. And it's just, these are folks who are doing what they can do to make a difference. And some of you are volunteering in the schools and getting out the vote. I see voting is power there, Deanna. To organize ourselves, to use our money and other things in a way that offers a prophetic critique of injustice in the marketplace and in the society. It's a perfect economy, if you will. Everything in nature uses only what it needs and gives something back to create this spectacular, interdependent world that we live in. Flourish, except for us. Rabbi Jonathan said, what we own, it's made by what we share. And why is that? Because that's how the whole rest of the natural world works. We plan it because of it. Because we say in this to change how alternative, on hoarding resources, but on sharing our resources. This is countercultural. This is a big deal. Morning. The kid, he starts, his mom can't give me, she can only give him a stick, so then somebody needs it. Pretty soon going to destroy his life to give it. And nobody's giving something that's going to, make their life, destroyed. Souls. And that's how we do this. So as we're about to kick off the campaign for 2023 about people giving, just with choirs and musicians, and I was up here telling that story a little earlier. I was thinking, she was kind of got a little swing inside her. I was loving that. So we have great people here with your financial support. It's not a quid pro quo economy. Some of the people who give the most, They ask for the least. Some of the people who give art. And this place will be here when I die, or you die, or somebody's in the hospital, or, we're celebrating the birth of a new life, and this place is going to be here with what we call a free paid at the minister. They understand through the fire of the witness of their own lives and the lives that they share with us and one another. And they bring that forward, and we say this little space here and in the sanctuary is going to be because you protect it, because you make it possible. In 2 weeks, we're going to do a service. 2 Sundays from now, we're going to do a service all based in banned books. And you're going to fall off your chair when you hear some of the stuff, the inspiring things that kids can't even read now in schools, or you can't even get in libraries in Oklahoma or across the country. So it's going to be really inspiring. It's a deeply spiritual thing to live with this kind of trust that if I give what I give, if people give what they give, and that spiritual trust, it's the best of what it means to be human, our lives and our resources. In the words of author Kent Nerburn, such giving is not an economic exchange. It's a generative act. It does not subtract from what we have. Say today is that there are ways that we build up a kind of a false sense of self about, like, I need to keep this stuff, and I'm greedy, or that's what we need to continue to let the system happen. And this is what I want to pass on to our children. This is what I want to pass on to the next generation. Amongst ourselves, we're urged to be even more packed. We're still building our way back, and appreciate all that you can do to just help us to build back, because this, Chris is say this morning. Y'all. So many things you can get involved in fall season, and also on Zoom. We're having a new member orientation. Today's service offering right now, it's for hurricane relief. For those who've been devastated, they do a great job of finding organizations that sometimes don't get the plate collection to run the church, because people pledge. Get some coffee and what have you, but it's something we were able to hand them all. Just asking to know what you're going to do so we can set a realistic budget. Hurricane relief. Thank you. Wonder, pretty I see them really say it. I watch so. What a wonder. With you when we're together in this place, and we can think about the music and hear this music together. I was thinking, I've been watching these scientific programs about evolution. I've just been so amazed to think that it all started with this explosion, and then all these little singers. We're playing music, and it's like, what? What we can do with it in the time that we have together. It's so great to be with you. I'm going to blow out our chalice. If you've got one at home, you can blow yours out with us. But even as this light goes out, may the illumination this week and until we meet again. Thank you.